They say blood is thicker than water, but what if the people that were supposed to protect you the most were the villains in your story? Hey everybody, welcome to the 4th episode of Life Vetted. Thank you for being here and tuning in. This one was a little hard just because it details my origin story. Where and how and why and who was involved in creating the foundation of who I was, how I grew up, how I dealt with life up to a certain point, right? When we're young and we come into this world, we really don't have a conscious choice anyway to where we are coming and who we are coming here with. And you are very vulnerable in that sense, right? Like, you're a kid, and unless you have good parents or a good family, you're kind of at the mercy of your environment. And I was a victim of my environment for a very, very long time. And this story will trigger some people. So I just want to put out a trigger warning that this story might rub some people the wrong way and it might trigger some emotions in some people. My earliest memory of being alive was, I believe I was maybe like 3 or 4 years old. I was already living with my stepfather. My mom separated from my father, I think was about 2 or 3 years old. And then I started to live with my stepfather around maybe 3 or 4 years old. My earliest memory was me in my stepfather and mom's bathtub. My grandma had already come from Cuba at this point, and I was taking a bath. And I remember I was like playing, I remember my grandma looking down on me. And then all of a sudden, I see like fear in her eyes, and she's like, "Give me a second, I'll be right back." And I remember being in the tub by myself for a little bit, and then somebody coming to get me. I think it was my grandma, wrapping me in a towel, running with me to a room. I believe it was my room. I shared a room with her at that point, so it was our room. She closes the door, and I'm just sitting there wet in the towel on the bed, wondering like what the hell's going on. Then minutes after that, I remember being pulled out of the room. Everyone's in panic, being pulled out of the room, placed in the sofa in the living room. And I remember, I believe my brother was about, 17 or 18, because he's about 15 years older than me, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, somewhere between 13 and 15 years older than me. I know it's odd that I don't know my brother's exact age, but you'll understand why the more we get into the story. So I remember sitting on the sofa and my brother having my mom by the neck up against the wall, and In my earlier memories of this story, I remember a knife being involved. But the older I get, the details are a little fuzzy, so I don't quite remember if there was a knife involved. But my earlier memories, I remember there being a knife involved. And he had her by the neck, and he was screaming at her, saying that he was going to kill her. At this point, I just remember screaming hysterically, my mom yelling at my grandma to call the police. I remember at some point my brother grabs me, and there was a lot of chaos involved. And that is my earliest memory of being alive, like on Earth. Just some history for you guys. My family is, all of them, they're from Cuba. My great grandfather was a doctor, and him and his wife, my great grandmother, had a pharmacy in Cuba, and he was a doctor. He got diagnosed with like skin cancer back in the day. They didn't know much about it. And from my understanding, when he got that diagnosis, he was so afraid of it that he killed himself. Then my great grandma and her kids all moved from where they lived, which was like in the farmlands of Cuba and Pinar del Rio, and then they moved to Havana. My mom is the oldest of 6 kids. My grandma had 6 children with 3 different men. My mom's father, she never met him. And her stepfather, the father of the 4 middle kids, was the one who raised her. My mom had my brother at 16 or 17 with like her first love. So that in itself tells you a little bit about the relationship that my mom and my brother have. They're born one day apart, and they are seriously trauma bonded. Okay, I was an outsider from the moment I was born. My mom had my brother at 16, 17. Very tumultuous childhood my brother had. My mom was, like I said, the oldest of 6 kids, so she was practically everyone's mother. She raised all her brothers and sisters. My grandma worked, and the kids kind of took care of themselves, and my mom was left in charge of everybody. And so when my brother was born, my mom was very young. They lived in Cuba. My brother's father was an alcoholic, very abusive. I mean, 17, 18 years old, not very stable. And after my mom separated from him, she met my dad. I don't know exactly how old my brother was when my mom met my dad. I think it might be around the same time that I met my stepdad, so maybe like 4, 5, something like that. But my mom met my dad, and they had a relationship. I'm not sure when exactly my dad left Cuba. He went to New York. And after he went to New York, my dad went down to Miami, Florida. My dad had a previous relationship where he had a daughter, which is my half sister. And before he had my half sister, I believe the woman that he was with, they had twin girls that didn't make it to the full term of the pregnancy. They died before they were born. Then he had my older sister, and then he met my mom, who already had my brother. After he went to New York and then down to Florida, he found a way to get my mom out of Cuba through another country. So my mom fled Cuba, went to Venezuela, was in Venezuela with my brother for about 4 years. And then finally my dad was able to bring her to the United States, to Miami. I believe they had to get married in order for him to do that. I'm not sure of the details because I don't ask a lot about those things, just because I don't really have a relationship with my mom and with my dad, really. But these are just the details that I know from when growing up and just the stories that your parents tell you. So once my mom got to Miami, I was born 1986. And they separated when I was about 3 or 4 years old. A lot of my childhood is blacked out. I remember bits and pieces of it because there was so much trauma that I think anyone with the amount of emotional trauma that I had would probably black it out as well. I remember when I was going to therapy after my daughter was born, and I was just telling my therapist like all these things. I remember her telling me, like, she was like, how are you even like alive right now? She's like, I don't know how you have made it this far without being like a drug addict or selling yourself on the street. Or I remember her saying that to me, which gave me a lot of validation in that moment, because I never realized how bad it was until I went to therapy. The first time I went to therapy, it was in Miami, and it was an older male doctor. And my whole life, I thought that I was the problem. Everything that had happened to me as a child, I thought was my fault. It wasn't until I was 26, that I had gone to this therapist that I told him everything. And he looked at me in the eyes, and he was like this really kind, older gentleman. He was so nice. And I remember him looking at me, and in his eyes, I could see that there was emotion behind his eyes when he was telling me this, that he looked at me and he said, Ninfa, your mother and your family are awful. None of this is your fault. You had terrible parents, and none of what happened is your fault. It's their fault. And nobody had ever said that to me before, okay? You have to understand. In Hispanic households, parents are superior, okay? Grandparents are even higher on that scale. So no one ever had told me to my face that I had a bad mother. That was like, I mean, what? Are you kidding? No way. You have to like idolize your mother. You have to worship her. Like, that is the only correct answer. So hearing that from this person who's neutral, right, at that age was so impactful. It changed everything for me up until that point. I always knew there was something wrong, and I had like this anger inside of me, but I never would dare to say out loud, especially that I had a bad mom. That's like taboo. And so hearing that completely blew my mind. My mom and my brother were the primary adults in my life. Like I mentioned, they went through a lot together. And I'm not trying to make any excuses at all whatsoever, because this story is not about them. It's about me. And so I'm not trying to make any excuses for them. I'm just trying to paint a picture for you guys of their bond, how they were trauma bonded from a really young age, because essentially they grew up together and then they went to Venezuela for 4 years, which was very traumatic for them. And so the more that they went through together, the more they created this really toxic, dependent relationship that they had one another. So by the time that I came along, I was the outsider. When I was 4 years old, we had family, my mom's family, my mom's cousins, had come and started to live in Miami. My mom didn't have any family here. She was the first one of all her siblings to come to the United States. It was her and my dad, my brother, me, and she had cousins that already lived here, and an aunt that lived here as well. And so my mom was very concentrated on making money. That was her main and only goal, because her primary thing was to get her whole family from Cuba to the United States. As I mentioned, my mom raised all her brothers and sisters as if they were their own. She was the oldest. So all she cared about, since I could remember, is bringing her mom over here and then bringing her brothers and sisters over here. So I would be left alone a lot at a young age, even at 4, with my second cousins, the kids of her cousins. And at 4 years old, I started to be molested by my girl cousin. At 4 years old, my childhood was taken from me. And there was no turning back after that, because having a mom who was not really present at all, and I was just left in other people's hands all the time, created this world that I should have never been exposed to. When I moved into my stepfather's house, my mom made friends with a neighbor, kind of sent me that way also. And that neighbor, I was about maybe 5 or 6. That neighbor showed me how to have an orgasm. I was 5, 6 years old. I was able to sleep over this person's house. I was left alone playing with this person. So you can imagine how my life completely changed from when I was 4 all the way until now. Once my mom brought my grandma over from Cuba, she was the primary person who would watch me. Also, very detrimental because I was forced to go to church. My grandma had become a born again Christian so that she could cleanse herself of all her sins. And ironically, the person who had molested me also went to this church. And so it was a very horrible, toxic cycle that I was living at 4, 5, 6 years old. My brother became addicted to drugs and alcohol at a very early age. So he abused my mom a lot. I watched a lot of it. As I got older, he also would be physical with me and abuse me as well. And all of this is happening to a child. No one protecting me, no one considering me. When my mom separated with my dad, as I got older, she made it very clear that she hated him, couldn't stand him, and I look a lot like my dad. I look like my mom, but I look a lot like my dad. And my personality is a lot more like my father. I'm very laid back, I'm not high strung. My mom and my brother are the same person. Literally the same person. I turned out more like my father. And so growing up, I was bullied by my mom and my brother constantly, by everyone who knew my father. My father is a 6'1", 6'2" height of a man, and he's a big guy. Okay, he's not like 400 pounds, but he's like probably like 250, right? He's a big guy. And I grew up people telling me that I look just like him, that I act just like him, that my body was just like him. And to a kid, at first, that might not seem like a big deal. But when you have your brother and your mom constantly talking about how my dad looks like a potato or has a potato face, or he's big and fat and lazy, or he's a deadbeat, you grow up hearing these things about your father, and then they're telling you that you look just like him and act just like him. That creates a lot of confusion. A lot. I grew up feeling the hate that my mother felt for my dad every time she looked at me. I never felt love from my mother as far as I can remember. Maybe when I was a baby, you could see it in pictures, I guess. Like, I don't. My body doesn't remember that. I remember being looked at, and I remember hate because I looked just like my dad. And I remember feeling my brother's hate because my brother loves my mom, but he hates her because of everything that she did to him when he was a kid. And so, on top of the sexual abuse and the physical abuse from my brother, seeing that, and then the emotional abuse, I had no chance, okay? I had no chance. I learned how to survive among this chaos. And it was no wonder that I made the choices that I made the older that I got. And it was no wonder that my life turned out up to a certain point the way that it was. The problem is that there was no concern for me. And I want to keep a picture up of me throughout this whole process, this whole episode, because I want everyone to remember who it is that we're talking about. Yes, we're talking about me. I'm old now. I'm gonna be 40 soon. But this is who this was happening to. And dare I blame the adults in my life. You can ask my mom right now or my brother right now and ask them questions about all these things, and they will deny. They will create excuses. They will turn it back on them. They will figure out a way to say, oh, but this was the situation. No accountability at all whatsoever. So you can imagine with what I just told you guys that obviously my childhood was taken from me from a very young age, and sex became a theme in my life because I correlated it with care and love, because it was happening to me through people that were my family or people that were very close friends. So I correlated that with care and love. I didn't know any better. I didn't have an example of what love and true love and care was from my family. The older I got, the more and more my mom separated herself from me. Her primary goal was her family in Cuba. It wasn't me. It wasn't even my brother. It was her mom and her 5 brothers and sisters. Every year we would go to Cuba, take clothes, take money, every year since I was born. Everything my mom the money she made, the jobs that she had, the clothes that she bought me, I always knew that they weren't for me. Every time my mom would buy me shoes, or she would buy me clothes, or she would buy me anything, I knew that they were mine temporarily. I knew that she was buying them for me because eventually I would grow out of them and they would be sent to my cousins in Cuba. That is how I grew up. I never felt like anything was really ever given to me out of love, ever. When my mom separated from my stepdad and she bought a house, the house had a pool, it had an outdoor barbecue, outdoor shower, we had a basketball court. It was a huge house. But the house was split up into, it had like an efficiency, and then it had like another part of the house that was turned into like a little apartment. It's very normal in Florida. So the main house had 2 big rooms with 2 bathrooms, and it had a laundry room. The laundry room had no air conditioning escape to that room. And you would think at this time, I'm like 5th grade, going to 6th grade, and you would think that my mom would put me in the 2nd bedroom, right? That's normal. No. My brother was a big problem at this point, right? 5th, 6th grade. Big problem. He was just out of control. I believe he was a security guard at the Mall of the America at that time. If you know, you know. But he was out of control. He was an addict. He was drinking, doing cocaine, very abusive. My mom let him stay in one of the efficiencies, which left the main master bedroom and a bedroom. My mom did not put me in that bedroom. My mom made a bedroom out of the laundry room that was probably like 100 square feet or like 150 square feet. She made that into my bedroom, no air conditioning, and put a wall unit on the wall. That second bedroom was empty for as long as I can remember. And the reason why she left it empty is because she was keeping it that way for her brother. That was the first person she was able to bring over from Cuba. I wasn't allowed to turn on the air conditioner during the day, and that house was hot. That room was so hot. I had to leave my door open so that the air could flow in. It did not flow in. And I wasn't allowed to use the air conditioner only at nighttime because my mom picking pennies to pay for that house and to pay for the electricity. I cannot imagine me, now that I'm a mom, having my daughter sleep in what was a laundry room. I could never. I don't care if I had family coming from anywhere, like the poorest country in the world, name it. I don't care. I could never imagine having my daughter in it's not even a bedroom. It was literally not a bedroom. Okay? And having an empty room for months and months on end. The room was empty for months and months on end until my uncle finally came from Cuba. That is the trend pretty much my whole life. Being put aside, being ignored, thinking she'll be fine. Oh, she'll be fine. That was always what my mom literally said to me. Well, I had to worry about your brother because your brother was an addict and he went through a lot when he was a kid, but I always knew you would be fine. I remember when she left my stepdad, she started dating some guy. I hated him. And I remember one time I was in my little laundry room and I can hear them having sex in her room. And I remember going up to the door and knocking and asking for her, and I can hear these noises. And then I got so mad because my mom was ignoring me. I knew what they were doing in the room. I was 6th grade, 5th grade. And I was so mad that she was ignoring me that I went into my room, and it was the first time I tried to run away. I put all my clothes in a bag and I said to her, after they had come out of the room, both of them, that I was going to move to my dad's house. Up until that point, my dad wasn't very active in my life. He would pick me up on the weekends. He would pick me up on a Sunday or he would pick me up on a Saturday, and he would take me to Chuck E. Cheese or Grand Prix, if you know, you know, miniature golf, things of that nature. In my eyes, my dad was pretty cool. He was pretty laid back, you know. At that point, I didn't realize how absent he was. To me, it was just normal that he would pick me up on the weekends and take me out. That was the routine. And so I remember as I'm packing my stuff and I'm so angry, this giant man that my mom was with, such an asshole, starts laughing at me in front of my mom and says, "You're going to go live at your dad's house? Your dad's a deadbeat. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to sleep? On a couch? He doesn't even have another bed for you to sleep in. And as he's laughing and telling me this, my mom is also laughing at me. Both of them. This man who I don't know, he's not my family. I don't know. My mom's boyfriend and my mom, my mother, both laughing at a sixth grader packing her bags, wanting to leave and move to her dad's house. Now, my dad wasn't any better. He was a weekend dad. He would pick me up on the weekends and take me out. He found a girlfriend and they were together up until she died a couple of years ago. But that lady was the definition of evil stepmother. She would talk bad about me while I was in the room. She would talk bad about my mom while I was in the room. She destroyed home videos that my dad had of me when I was a baby. She destroyed pictures of me when I was a baby. She even took all my clothes one time when we were on a trip to Cuba that my dad also went with us. And she took all my shoes and threw them away. I mean, this lady was awful. My dad never really stood up to her, at least not in front of me. My dad always picked her over me. He stopped a relationship with me a few years before she died because she did not want him to have a relationship with me. And he, of course, did what he was told. He also abandoned me when I needed him, didn't stand up for me, didn't defend me, and I was left alone trying to survive and defend myself. The anger that had been building up inside of me from my oldest memory, it was like a snowball. The older I got, the angrier I got, the more shame and guilt that I had, the more it built and built and built and built. By the time I got to like high school, end of middle school, the things that I would do for attention, affection were insane. I remember taking my friendships so seriously and being so possessive over my friends and being almost like crazy over the people that I loved so much, like, because it's all that I had. At home, I had a mom who didn't pay attention to me unless it was something that she could brag about later, like a play, a song recital, me performing in chorus, like unless it was something that made her look good, or something she could brag about to her friends, there was no other contact. And you would think that my brother, who went through a lot of things growing up, would want to protect me or want to defend me, but he was so lost in his world that I became an enemy too. All my mom ever did was work and send money to Cuba. Literally. She preaches about family and about unity and about blood being thicker than water and all this stuff. But in my experience, it's just simply not true. I've had friends that have done more for me than my family has ever done. As I got older, I remember my mom would pawn me off on friends. There were times where I would spend more time at my friend's house than like my own house. And I can just imagine them like talking now, me being an adult, like talking in their room, like, okay, well, we're gonna go to dinner, but Nympha's still here, so I guess we have to take her. And like, you know what I mean? Or like, it's just so sad when I think back to it. I was just pawned off all the time. And I can't even imagine the conversations that were had behind my back when I was younger about just casually spending a whole week eating at these people's house, or casually being taken to Orlando with no money, just having them pay everything for me, or whatever the case may be. It was just, looking back now, I just can't imagine ever abandoning my child in that way. When I was in elementary, I actually got accepted to go to a magnet school, which is a special school of the arts. And I remember when my mom would take me to school in the morning, she had to, because there was no bus that would go there. It was a special school that you had to audition for, that you specifically got picked for. And I remember my mom bitching and moaning every morning to take me to school. She hated it. She hated being woken up early in the morning. She hated having to drive to take me to school. I mean, it was like a task for her. She absolutely hated it. And when I got to middle school and high school, she would never take me. Like, never. If I woke her up in the morning, it was like a problem. And one of those mornings, my brother was living in a shed outside of our house. My mom did not allow him in the house because he was a drug addict. He was doing cocaine and God knows what else, and so she kept him out of the house. It didn't really help. It's not like keeping him out of the house kept the abuse out of the house or the toxicity out of the house. No, because he would just come, bang on the door, they would fight. I mean, one time he punched me in my stomach while my mom was in bed. Like, it didn't help much that she kept him out of the house. He made a home out of the shed in the back of our house. He was living in the shed, sleeping on a cot. And one morning, I missed the bus. And I asked my mom to take me to school. And of course, she screamed at me and told me that she was not taking me to school, that I could walk if I wanted to, but that she wasn't taking me and I needed to find someone else. Or if I didn't go to school, she probably wouldn't even care. So what do? I go to the back and I ask my brother to take me to school. My brother gets up, borrows my mom's car, takes me to school, drops me off. I'm there late, first period, PE. I hated it. And I'm in PE, and about 10-15 minutes after I'm in PE, I see a helicopter coming down. And we knew that it was like an accident, that someone was getting picked up in the helicopter. What I didn't know is that it was my brother. He got T-boned by a big old truck. And thank God he was wearing his seatbelt, because he probably would have died. My brother suffered a very, very bad spinal cord accident. They had to get a doctor from like California, I think, or something. That there was only 1 or 2 doctors in the whole United States that did this specific surgery, because there were these specific discs that got broken. And my brother was essentially paralyzed for a while. He had to learn how to walk again. He had to learn how to, do all these things. And he's never been 100% since then. After that accident, the hatred from my brother grew even more. He blamed me for his accident. Still does. Probably blames my mom too. My brother received a huge settlement for his accident. It wasn't his fault. Huge settlement. You would think, after the years of abuse that he put my mom through, me through, my brother stole money from my mom. I remember her blaming him for me not having a like quinceañera party, like a sweet 16 party, because he stole that money, which I don't believe anything that my mom says, but at the time I did. She always made sure that we were pinned against each other and somehow that we never really got too close. And my brother got a big settlement from that, and you would think that after everything that had happened, my mom would try to protect me and my future and figure out a way to maybe put some money aside in a trust or anything like that. Protect me from maybe having to struggle as I got older, or what if I wanted to go to college or anything like that. None of these things were taken into account, of course. Once my brother got into that accident, my mom felt even more guilty, and they got closer. And when I say they got closer, again, this is not in a healthy, loving way. It's just that the trauma bond got tighter and tighter and tighter. I mean, my brother, very emotionally manipulative, just like my mom, bought her a apartment at the beach, then took it away from her, would dangle it like a carrot in front of her in that way. My brother has never helped me with anything, my mom either. You would think all this family, blood thicker than water, all this stuff, you would think that they would have put in place a plan for me, the youngest kid in their family unit, right? My mom, me, and my brother. That was it. That they would think about that, or that my mom would think about that, or that my mom would force him to think about that. And that's something that you would think that would be put in place, but it never wasn't. The hatred only grew from there, right? You know, I was the daughter of a deadbeat, a man who didn't work, was lazy. That was my title. That was literally my title my whole life. And my mom and my brother were a team because they had been together for so long since they were really young. They practically grew up together. I never felt guilty for what happened to my brother, not a drop. I remember thinking that maybe my mom should have just taken me to school. But I never felt guilty for what happened to my brother. I had encountered so much abuse through the years from him, and hearing my mom talk about him and how awful he was, and that I didn't feel bad about it. I didn't. I was very numb to everything. I was in flight or fight mode, survival mode my whole life. There would only be these explosions of emotions every once in a while. I was very good at keeping it cool throughout, even though inside it was insane. But I was very cool. I was very calm and collected all the time because I had to be. My mom was a crazy wave of emotion all the time. My brother was too. Everyone was. And I couldn't afford to be because one, nobody would be there for me anyway. And two, it would not be conducive to the situation. I would fill up journals like nobody's business. I think by the time that I was in high school, I probably had like 4 journals written of everything. That's how I would get my emotions out. And every once in a while, there would be an explosion of emotion. You know, in middle school, I got jumped. I would get into fights. In high school, I was just looking for someone to look at me the wrong way. I was just waiting. It was almost as if I wanted to fight because that's the only other way that I can get out my anger. I was in drama and I was in musicals and I did a lot of that. So music helped a lot with feelings and things of that nature. But I was in turmoil throughout my entire adolescence, especially when I finally went into puberty. There was never a sex talk. There was never, the only thing my mom ever told me was never depend on a man and you better not get pregnant. Like, that's it. There was no conversation. There was no type of birds and bees talk. I was literally figuring it out on my own. There was no person to talk to, no advocate, no nothing. Which is why probably I was smoking weed at such a young age, why I lost my virginity at such a young age, why I was experimenting and figuring things out at such a young age. I had nobody to talk to. I remember when my mom finally found out that I had been molested at a young age. I told her because there was an incident that happened that she discovered, and in her hysteria of screaming at me and hitting me, I screamed at her back and I said, well, maybe this happened because I was molested by a girl cousin when I was this age. Of course, my brother had a normal reaction. He didn't do anything about it, but he had the normal reaction of, oh my God, I can't believe that fucking happened. My mom, the first words out of her mouth when I told her what had happened to me were, I was maybe 15, 16. Her first words were, well, you must have liked it because you always wanted to be with that cousin. I laugh, but it's not funny. I laugh in disbelief because I can't believe that a mother would say that to a child. Okay? That's what she said to me. From that moment, before all of that, I just knew that I was angry and that I was sad and things had happened to me and I didn't quite understand, but this is just the life that I was living. When my mom told me that, I put the blame on everything on myself. When she said those words to me, it must have been because you liked it, because you wanted to be with your cousin all the time, so it's your fault. That's exactly what I carried with me throughout my whole life until I went to therapy and someone told me, no, it's not your fault. You just had a bad mother. But from 15, 16 to then, I walked around as if everything that had happened to me was my fault. Everything. So when I had abusive boyfriends, when I had abusive situations, when I was going through all these things, I thought to myself, well, I deserve it. This is my fault. This is what I get. Imagine being in high school and all your peers are having what seems to be a pretty normal life, right? You get your driver's license and you get your car and you go to high school and these girls are wearing Coach purses and they are popular and everyone likes them. And you're walking around your high school thinking that every bad thing that has ever happened to you, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, all of it is your fault. Because it can't possibly be my mom's fault. No way. That's my mother. She loves me. It can't be my brother's fault. No way. He loves me too. That's a heavy, heavy, heavy load to carry, my friends. Let me tell you. I don't know how it is that I made it through that time. I sometimes I think about it and I don't know. And I just kept going. I just kept going. Once I graduated high school, obviously there was no money put aside for me. There was no thought about my future. There was nothing. Normal parents, think about those things. Maybe not today, because I think college is becoming obsolete, to be honest. But in my day, it was still something that you looked forward to, something that you planned for. There was no planning for me. My mom figured that I would just do it all by myself. And I did. I tried, at least. I started working at like 16. No, yeah, 16, 17. I started working. I had worked at the youth fair a couple of times. I had a boyfriend at the time who also worked at the youth fair every year. And so I started working there, which is funny. That boyfriend of mine, how demented. I don't even understand this. My mom had opened a barbershop and he was a barber at that barbershop. And my mom swore up and down the river that I needed to date this barber of hers. I was a sophomore, he was a senior. We had to be together. Funny and oddly enough, that was my first physically abusive relationship that I had. This person now lives in like South Carolina, North Carolina. He's like a Buddhist now. Very calm, cool, and collected. But at one point, this person made me put my mouth on the pavement like this. One time, obviously he was on drugs. I didn't know he was on drugs. I didn't know that my brother was on drugs when I was a teenager. I thought it was just alcohol. I didn't know it was like cocaine. I was still innocent to that extent. I know this now, but in my head. I remember coming home one day and he grabbed my head, that boyfriend, and put my mouth on the pavement like this. And he went to kick me, to knock my teeth out. And instead of kicking me, he pretended like he was going to kick me. I was going to flinch. And he went down to my face and started laughing like the Joker and Batman, like that, in my face, laughing at me. Okay? I was terrified. But I couldn't tell my mom because I didn't have that relationship with her. And if she thought he was great, he had to be great, right? He had to be. I was a sophomore. And she's the one who made that whole relationship happen. It's funny because after I finally got away from him, I told my mom about it. He was a barber in her barbershop, the best one there, making the most money. You would think that she would, I don't know, kick him out, go crazy on him, stick him with a scissor. I don't know. That's what I would do if I found out that my daughter had been abused by one of my employees. No, my mom's response was, well, you didn't tell me when it happened, so what am I supposed to do about it now? I lived my whole life thinking that everything that happened to me was my fault. I remember when I was working, I got a job. I saved up all my paychecks. When I was legally able to work, I started working at PetSmart. It was my first job. I loved that job. And I remember that I saved up all my paychecks and I would save them all up until I was 18 and I was able to open a bank account. Couldn't open a bank account by yourself until you were 18. And after I graduated high school, I moved out very quickly. And I lived in a little studio apartment. I went to school full time, 4 classes. I worked full time. I started working at a real estate slash gate company that was owned by the family that my mom would pawn me off on all the time. Oddly enough, I was being sexually assaulted by the father of that family in that job, which I left very quickly after that happened. Got a job at the bank and pretty much worked in banking my whole life until now. I remember moving out from the efficiency, then going into the apartment. I got myself a little apartment with, it was like 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. I was so proud of that. And I remember that I went to a family party. And this was one of the many betrayals of my mother, which you guys have heard a lot of them now, but this was another one to add on to that. I went to this family party and my mom was carrying the baby of the cousin who had molested me. And she was so happy and dancing and she was like, "Come here, come, look at the baby." And I remember thinking, like, is this woman crazy? What is going on? She never cut ties with that family. She never confronted them. She confronted the mother and they said it was not true. The cousin said it was not true. My mom said that it was just kid stuff. She never confronted them. She never defended me. She never did anything. As a matter of fact, she was more friends with them more than ever. I don't think she believed me, to be honest, because that family would go to church literally every single day there was church. It was a Baptist church, so they would go to church Wednesdays and Sundays, and there was like Bible study like on Saturdays, and that family would be there every single day, 365, every single day of the year. So she couldn't believe that someone who was like that and was like a model daughter could ever do something like that. And so my mom never confronted them, never stopped a relationship with them. I went to this party and I realized that when I see her so engaged and so laughing and dancing with specifically this person. It's not like she was doing that in a group. No, no, no. When I walked into this party, she was specifically celebrating with this person and this person's newborn son. I felt so betrayed. I left the party right away. Well, first I went into the bathroom, cried my eyes out. The boyfriend that I had at the time, who was an absolute angel of a person, knew about these things that had happened to me and got me out of the party, like through the side door. Like, I don't even think that they noticed that I had left. And this is just the natural relationship that I've had with my mom throughout, always. It's a constant battle of wanting to please her, wanting to do things to earn her love, because she taught me that love is not given unconditionally. It's earned. Obviously, that's not the way that it goes, especially with a daughter, but that's how I was raised. that I had to earn her love. So it was a constant battle of trying to earn her love and then her betraying me or not meeting the expectations and then feeling like it's my fault. It's all my fault. And I remember not understanding why I felt the way that I felt. Sometimes I would have these like just outbursts of crying and anger out of nowhere. Like a situation would happen, maybe with like a boyfriend or a friend or at work or something. And I would have like these outbursts of crying and anger, and I wouldn't understand where they were coming from. I didn't get it. I didn't get it, you know? And I lived with that throughout my whole life, but I was never able to analyze it, and I was never able to really dive deep into it because I was on the go. I was 18 years old and I was the only person out of my friend group who had their own apartment, who had their own house, who had a car. I had to work 40 hours to pay the rent while I went out on the weekends and everyone got shit-faced and went home to sleep at their parents' house. I had to go home, wake up the next day, and go to work. My level of responsibility was way higher than everyone else. And it was the only choice that I had, because when I made this decision to leave my house and move out, it was because if I had stayed there, I would have gone off the handle. My mom at that point, when I was like 17, 18, I don't know what was going on personally in her life. I really don't care. She was the worst she had ever been. Ever been. Constantly screaming at me. I mean, constantly just abusive. Like, my brother also would pop. My brother never went away. He always would pop in, and every time he would pop in, it was like eggshells because you never knew what he was going to do. You didn't know what he was going to break or what he was going to throw or who he was going to throw a punch at, or it was a constant, constant, constant survival. I have, when I moved out, I had put up with things from jobs just because I knew that I couldn't lose my job because I had to pay the rent. And I was not going to go back home. I would live on the street in my car before I ever went back to that house. Slowly but surely, my school deteriorated. I took less and less classes because I was working 40 hours at the bank. And my dreams of what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be just kind of took a side seat to paying bills and paying the rent. Obviously, I had to take out loans to go to school. There was never a nest egg for me. There was never anything like that. The only reason that I had a car is because my mom bought that car for herself and we were both using it. So that's why I had the car. And then eventually she bought herself her own car. But it's the only reason why she bought that car is because she didn't have a car and she needed a car. And so nothing has ever been given to me. Ever. Anything given to me after my daughter was born by my mom was not help. It was not a gift. It was restitution. There is, without a doubt, a beautiful source in this world. I don't believe for a second that what I went through didn't have a bigger purpose. Do I believe that people have to go through hardships to be a good person? Absolutely not. If I had been cared for and nurtured how I was supposed to be I would be ruling the world right now. I don't believe that you have to struggle or be the underdog, that underdog story, to become something or to appreciate anything. I was a good kid, and I knew that I was privileged because I would go to Cuba every single year from the time that I was born. Okay, I had to wash my underwear by hand. I had to use newspaper to clean my butt when I visited my family. I knew that I was special in that way, that I was lucky in that way. That didn't make me spoiled or anything. If I had been cared for like a child is supposed to be cared for, I would have been even more at a younger age. I've had to figure things out by myself. I was a late bloomer. I've been a late bloomer. Nothing wrong with that. I'm okay. I'm very grateful and thankful and at peace with my life. I know now who I am, who I've always been. That little girl, I love her. I am the mom that I needed now. And I truly believe that by loving my daughter, being a better person, caring for my daughter, being a good mom, living my life the way I live now, as I heal my present moment, as I continue to heal my life into the future, I am healing my past. Going back to what my therapist told me when I have told her my whole story, and her opening her eyes really wide and being like, wow, how are you not out there dead or doing drugs or selling your body? I can understand through that how special I am and how I am the generational curse breaker of my family. I am the black sheep, but I am the goat. It's funny because my mom is always trying to prove herself to her mom and saying, well, I took care of all your kids. I'm the reason why your kids, never had to rob or become a prostitute to get money in Cuba. I raised all of them. I'm the best daughter that you have, right? And it's funny because I've never said that to my mom. I just wanted my mom to love me. But I am the best thing that came out of that lady. I was always the last thought because she figured that I was the stronger one, so I would be okay. Was that what a 5-year-old needed? What a 6-year-old needed? What a 7-year-old needed? No. I grew up thinking I was fat, ugly, lazy. That's what I grew up. I grew up with shame and guilt that everything that had happened to me was my fault. That's how I grew up. That's my origin story. I have never been more certain of my faith, even with all the ugliness that happened to me. Even with all of that, I have never been more certain of my faith and the goodness that lives inside of me. It was always there. It just took me a really long time to figure it out. Now I get the chance to turn all the tables around and turn my present and my future and my daughter's present and her future into something else. I have what my mom and brother will never have, which is the most beautiful relationship with my child. And I'm okay with that. Last thing I'm going to say is make sure that you guys nurture the relationships that you have with your children. Be present, be genuine, and put them above everyone else. You got to put yourself first. You got to fill up your own cup, and then your kids. It's important for them. It's important for you. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. The lessons will find you. Until next time, this is Life Vetted.